A lot of the things we're hoping to work towards, we need a coordinated approach, experience. We definitely need a central facility. We cannot operate as outside entities like one small community, one community. We have to kind of bring things together. We have to define a clear vision of where we need to go, and this is what the Forestry is going to do that we're building. It's going to define where we're going. We already did what we would call phase one, was build consensus and build a partnership within our First Nation communities. That's done. Now it's actually to build a strategy. And of course, we see these nice little triangles. This is what we need to put our triangle together. We're going to hopefully move this to a circle. Because one thing I don't like about the triangle is the fact that we got jagged edges. We want to be more fluent. A long-term vision. Of course, one of the things we keep telling government, we keep telling industry, if you expect us to participate and expect us to consult and expect us to engage, come to us. But yet there's still that paternalistic attitude by government that we know what's best for you. We're going to fix all your problems. So they come up with these strategic plans, or they come up with the latest thing is proponent guidelines of how industry should engage First Nations. But this is like me telling Cecilia in her non-timber forest product business, don't you worry, I'm going to build a plan that you're going to follow. And it's going to make you a success without having any input. That's how we're told that it's going to get better for us, by letting government or letting industry tell us what's the best. Not going to happen. It'll never be successful. We have to do it ourselves, and we have to have the political support to do that from our leadership. And we have to develop something that like the question right now, is it going to be a 5, 10, 15, 20, 50-year plan? I know in the Eelgrounds case, when we did our management plan was, drive the rethinking of capacity building programs. Right now, a lot of these capacity building programs that are designed for us don't work. We have to design it for ourselves and for our youth. We're more visual learners than at the books all the time. We like to be out there in the environment. We like to be out there learning from our peers, learning from our elders, learning from our parents and stuff like that. That's how we learn. We have our expertise in our communities, just as industry and government has their expertise. You'll find sometimes you'll ask our elders a certain question because you think he's an expert or she's an expert. That elder will turn around and say, I have to go ask my elder. Or I have to go ask one of my elder adults because they know more about that than I do. So we do have that expertise at various levels within our community. We're just not asked about it. Again, very simple. It has to be initiated by us. I wouldn't be here today or be able to come up here if my First Nations never said, you need to get out there, you need to explain what we're trying to do, and you need to explain that we're going to do it for ourselves. We need to develop our own structures, our own mandate, our governance, how we're going to do it, how we're going to support it, and where we're going to locate whatever we decide to develop. We have to do it for ourselves. And these are some of the old pictures in my old days. Some of the crews I used to train, some of the accreditation we used to have. Like when we did the ASEP, the Aboriginal Skill Employment Program, we had people working at Forestry Canada in the research side of things. We had people acquiring their own forwarders and stuff like that. We had, both gender type of crews out there doing planting, thinning, and of course, at that time we were involved with Eagle Forest product before it was sold from underneath our feet. Use of a shotgun clause. You ever hear those shotgun clauses? Where we're only 10% ownership, so we weren't a majority holder. The 30% holders more or less sold the company from underneath us. That was Eagle Forest product. So that ends my. Oh no, it doesn't. I must have added a few slides. Okay. So I know it's getting late. Of course, like I said, currently we're discussing the need around activities involved every change in forestry sector. And we're already at the point where we determine how our First Nation communities are going to position themselves to benefit for these changes. There's a lot of changes coming. If we don't get ready for them, it's our fault. We know that. But at the same time, in trying to get ready for it, we're trying to explain to the public as a whole of why we're just getting involved now. Why we weren't allowed to be involved. And what were the mechanisms that kept us from getting involved. But things are changing. I've been at this for 35 years. And we've been up this road quite a bit. For some reason, because of the flavor of government of the day, all of a sudden we steamrolled. And we all know how politics works, is that depending on the flavor of government of the day, there'll be some real good things coming from one particular party, but because either the defeated party or the new government coming in, even though that was the best idea in the world, because it wasn't this government's idea, they scrap it. That's the norm. If we actually stayed focused, because we have to admit there are some positive things that come out of government. If they just stick with them and let them run their full course, this world would be a lot better world. But the natural resources would be in a lot better shape if we stuck with the positive changes that governments and industry have made over the days. But they keep changing every time you turn around. That they keep changing policies and directive. If they just stuck to one and actually worked with it and develop it and fix it as we're moving forward, it'll make it better at the end of the day. But you know darn well, whatever the conservative government does today, the liberal governments will undo tomorrow, the conservative government will undo it again. It's high time, I don't mean to give a shot to any political party here, but it's high time we do give some other source of government the chance. If they mess it up, they can go back to the old, because we always say we end up with just the same government all the time. It's time that we kind of give some other thinking the means to make some change. And things like climate change and all that is big issues now. And I gave a treaty presentation the other day to the Department of Environment and Local Government. And we always talk about how important the laws are of this land, how government should be implementing their laws. But we can't figure out as First Nations, when it comes to the Environment Assessment Process, or the Environment Assessment Act, of how come a constitutional protective right, as cited in Section 35 of the Constitution of Canada, is not a trigger. A law such as the protection of Aboriginal treaty rights, when it comes to the natural resources in our land, how can forestry be not applicable to an EIA when it really affects the Aboriginal treaty right? And it's law, but yet it doesn't trigger an EIA. And I kind of threatened Department of Local Government, because I said, I'm 56 years old. I do not plan on leaving this earth until forestry goes through an EIA. I said, I hope I'm not prematurely removing myself from this earth and government announced tomorrow that forestry will go through an EIA, or if it happens 50 years down the road, I'm going to be here till I'm 100 years old. But it's going to happen before I leave this earth, that forestry going through an EIA. I say this simply because of what our elders say. A lot of our artifacts are found around stream banks, shores, streams, and within the first 3 to 4 inches of duff in the forest. So clear cutting itself doesn't affect it when you really just cut the clear and you got machines, but the scarification. You got those machines, the scarification machines, going across the land, and they're ripping up the land, and they're just picking up the artifacts and throwing them. And believe me, there's artifacts out there that nobody's aware of. A lot of our elders are aware of. There's burial sites out there that our elders. Do you think after 10,000 years that there's only 3 burial grounds? Just the logic and the timeline tells you more. There's a lot more out there. Just the environment impact assessment that was done for the Anderson Bridge that crosses the Miramichi River up there, there was never no EIA applied to that in the past. Or if it was just your standard, write it off, get the project done. At least now the EIA does have to, the archaeologist side of EIA with respect to artifacts is a little more involved in that than it was 10 years ago. Just on that site alone, they found 78 artifacts. And here was a site that was disturbed since that mill and that road was built back in 1930. And they still found 78 artifacts there last spring. It goes to show you that the president of First Nations, a lot of our history is still in the ground. And a lot of our chiefs are so worried about all these scarification machines going through the forest to do planting because it's uprooting a lot of that history. It's still going to be there, but it ain't going to be in its pristine shape as the day it was laid there. You don't really understand the history once the scarification machines go over it. So that, you know, just the fact that they found that ambush site, the caribou ambush site down at Funday Connector coming through, that alone changes the modeling related to how archaeology looks at forestry now. So here's another thing that it's probably going to change the EIA process with respect to forestry simply because of that type of finding, where they were always told there was nothing there, then all of a sudden, just by chance, they found a piece of quartz in a skidder trail, a forestry track, and here it turned out to be a 4,800-year-old caribou ambush site. And we had to fight with government right to the last minute because I'm sorry to interrupt, I just left my shoes in here this morning. Department of Transportation, the first thing they wanted to do, even after that site was found, even though, remember we met with the Department of Tourism, and they wanted to develop like interpretation centers along that Funday Connector of the Aboriginal history in that area, we still had to fight with the Department of Transportation not to pave over it. They still wanted to pave over the site. How would you like it if your ancestors were on a piece of ground for 4,800 years and the first thing government wanted to do was pave over it and let cars travel across it? You wouldn't be too happy, would you? Well, had this, mind you, they're not going to do it now. They're going to go around it. But we had to fight to stop that. But they were going to pave over it. We don't, like, forestry is important to us. But forestry don't take precedence over our history and over who we are. And we'll make the changes in the allowance to protect our ancestors' way and to protect our history. And it's tough when government, who's supposed to be your partner, and supposed to, you know, they always talk about the honor of the crown when it comes to our court cases. Right now, there's no honor with any government because they do not respect who we are as a people. And what we need to protect and what our ancestors in their way of life, how important it was for us to preserve that. Because those sites are educational tools for our next generation. And to have, you know, I wouldn't want to drive down with my grandchildren here in 30 years' time. Well, I actually got two now. I say 30 years' time, I'm giving myself a little more. But anyway, I don't want to drive down and say to my grandchildren, oh, see this piece of paper driving over? We used to hunt caribou underneath it. You know, rather than pointing to the site. Yeah. And to being able to take the children out to site and say, this is where my ancestors hunted. And then that blows the Gagnon line, the crap. You always hear talk about the Mi'kmaq and the Maliseet. This is a proven Mi'kmaq ambush site, and it's in the Funday area. Of course, excuse me, establish a forum and network where valuable input and guidance from the grassroots level can be effective utilized. Oh, it went dead again? Gee, that's telling me something. But it's the same thing why I'm here today. I'm just trying to share some of my experience, but also where we're heading as First Nation people. It's you young folks that are going to be leading the way down the road. And, you know, if some of you go to work for a government, then I hope a little bit of this absorbs the state.